Lily&Elly. Today I'm going to read a story called Sammy Skunk's Super Sniffer. Are you ready to listen? Okay, I'm going to read you the story. Sammy Skunk's Super Sniffer. Even when Sammy Skunk was just a little stinker, he had a super sniffer. He liked helping parents cook squash soup. He liked to help his Sammy would sit on Papa's shoulders, and Papa would stir the simmering soup. Sam, my man, what do you think? Papa said. Sammy would sniff and sniff. Sometimes Sammy smiled. Mama and Papa knew what that meant. The soup was good. Sometimes Sammy scrunches up his face. Mama and Papa knew what that meant too. Oh, Sammykins, Mommy would say, what does the soup need? Then Sammy would point to something, and Mama would sprinkle in the spot. Soon, Sammy was an honest-to-goodness soup expert. Before Sammy started school, his parents told his teacher about all his super sniffer. How useful, said his teacher, Alphabet. At recess on the first day, Sammy put his sniffer to work. Don't step there, he called out. Then he pointed to some inky, stinky mud. Don't sit here, he cried, and he pointed to some icky, sticky sap. But when it was time for lunch, Sammy's super sniffer caused a problem. Alphabet led a class to the lunchroom. Students, I'd like to meet Susie Horse. Susie is our new school cook. She'll be fixing tasty soups of our lunches. Susie served bowls of soup to everyone. He squinted his eyes. He scrunched up his nose, then whispered, Don't eat the soup. Susie Horse was not pleased. Is there a problem with my soup? She asked Sammy. I'm sorry, Susie, Sammy said. He took a small sip of the soup. Then he set down the spoon. I guess I'm not hungry. No one else seemed hungry either. Susie scowled. The next day, Susie served a different soup. All the children watched Sammy. He sniffed. He squinted up his eyes. He scrunched up his nose, and he tried to swallow a big spoonful of spoon. Suddenly, Sammy sneezed. Achoo! Soup spurted out of his mouth and his nose. I'm so sorry, Susie, said Sammy. He wiped up the soupy mess. Susie was silent as a stone, and her face was stormy. Alphabet tried to explain about Sammy's sniffer. Susie Horse still scowled. Then let Mr. Super Sniffer fix the soup, she said. Alphabet smiled. Would you like to try some, Sammy? She asked. Sure, said Sammy, if it's okay for Susie. Susie's face still looked stormy. Okay, Mr. Super Sniffer, he said. Come back tomorrow morning during recess. When Alphabet took Sammy to the kitchen the next day, he was shaking in his boots. Susie's face was stormier than ever. Here's today's soup, Susie said. She pointed a steaming pot. What kind of soup is it? Sammy asked. It's squash soup, said Susie. I made it with squash and water. Oh, said Sammy, sometimes I help my parents to make squash soup. Susie squinted up her eyes. What sort of stuff? She asked. I'll show you, said Sammy. He scooped up carrots, celery, onions, and apples. Susie fussed and she sliced and diced. Apples in squash soup? I'd never heard of such a thing. But Sammy was getting started. He said, shake in some of this and that, sprinkle in some of these and those. Now smoosh it all together. Susie scowled and smushed. This isn't squash soup, she snapped. It's a big sloppy mess. This is big sloppy mess. Sammy took a long, slow snip. Then he smiled a big smile. Taste it, Susie, said Sammy. Susie looked disgusted, but she took a tiny sip. She didn't smile, but she didn't scowl either. Then she slurped a large spoonful. The corners of her mouth twitched, and slowly Susie snapped a tiny little smile. Warning recess is over. Susie, said Sammy. I'll see you at lunch. Susie started, then she whispered, Thanks, Sammy. At lunch, Susie served big bowls of squash soup. Everyone's eyes were on Sammy. He sniffed, he tasted, and he smiled a big smile. Today, everyone was hungry. No one talked. The only sound in the lunchroom was slurping. Alpha Betty whispered in Susie's ear, This soup is simply delicious. Susie sat down next to Sammy's skunk. Would you bring your super sniffer to help me tomorrow, Sammy? She asked. So, sure, said Sammy, and Susie smiled her biggest smile. Then everyone had a second helping of the best squash soup ever, even Susie Horse. Oh, and this story was a really good one. And thank you for listening, Ma. Thank you for listening to the story. Bye.